What's going on, everyone? I am here today to talk about Cartoon Network City insights that haven't been publicly discussed before. Today, joining with me is Ninser. Go ahead and say hello.
Hello.
So, we are going to be doing a semi-deep dive on some insights from various alumni at Cartoon Network. And we're going to be looking at some Cartoon Network City kind of things that we kind of never knew. A little peek behind the curtain. A little kind of preview of things we never saw.
So, for those who might remember, during the season 2 promos of Ben 10, you would have an instrumental, and then the main song being Harder, Faster, Stronger by Daft Punk. Now, people do or don't remember this because they would play them at random times due to the project manager behind those promos signing on for a licensing contract to use the song for a certain amount of plays on broadcast.
Which honestly is something that I wish I knew more about. Because I know slightly about like licenses and licensing certain songs. And I know that you can either have a perpetual license or you can have a like limited license. I assume they paid for a limited license because the promo was not on TV.
Oh yeah, it's also
yeah.
why like they couldn't really re-release Fridays because they used so many stock music tracks for it.
That makes sense. So that's interesting there, honestly. I never knew that. And so with bands like Daft Punk, yeah, they could only use them for a certain amount of time. So for those of you who loved the voiceover in Cartoon Network City, Nicole was the voice of a lot of people's childhood, including mine. The classic, "This is Cartoon Network." I can't imagine Cartoon Network City without her. Well, apparently, she was a corporate decision. Not her specifically, but they knew they wanted a girl. That was a corporate decision. I don't know if there was any pushback on like, no, we want a boy, but it was definitely a corporate decision that they wanted a girl, and so they picked Nicole, and apparently the viewers hated her, and so behind the scenes they purposefully kept her on just a little bit longer, just to kind of spite the folks who hated her, which is both funny and also kind of, I am shocked people hated her. I cannot imagine City with anybody else, to be honest with you.
Yeah, she, like I said, she very much made the whole network feel like it was kind of like a special club or just something very exclusive to those that were watching.
Yeah, definitely made you feel included, almost like you were a kid who was attending the adult table, kind of in a way. So for those of you who loved Sin City, know that after a couple of years, it did a small transition. It was more of the city we know and love, and kind of more of a bit more stylistic options, a bit more, kind of there was a reddish background, some of the icons slightly changed. This was in the midst of some of the Yes era type content. And apparently, there were some people that were involved in that decision that did a lot of CG assets and things like that. It was a whole different aesthetic. It was a mixture of mid-century modern with tacky Baroque American chic. And apparently, it was titled Sin City 2.0 internally. We didn't obviously get that later on. I would assume that there was some podcast forum person that was like probably titled it that. But internally, it was 2.0, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, and the going along with the retro chic designs, the product of the Yes era was actually called the Red Campaign, where you just have the characters with red backgrounds.
So the concept of something, for example, like the Yes era, was actually a form of competition between internals at the company at the time. So what ended up getting greenlit was something called the Red Campaign, which ended up ultimately being the Yes era. but it competed against other internals' ideas for what could have been the next Cartoon Network City 2.0 or the next rebrand. And it almost makes me curious what some of those other options were, would have been, could have been, and the alternate timelines and futures that could have spawned from said decision making. However, I do think that the Yes era that we got was fairly good. I think it had lots of great ideas. Maybe not so great execution in some aspects, but I think a lot of it was really, really good overall. It does just make me curious what some of those other ones could or would have been. To tie into the Red campaign, apparently Cartoon Network Corporate wanted to be all things kids, all things to all kids, including beating Disney, beating Nick, in the competition of Cartoon War and promotional war and all of these things, because they were strictly competition. It was very similar to Nintendo versus Sega Genesis, but they kind of didn't really know how to go about it, so they just kind of threw kind of whatever they kind of could, out there to see what they could do to compete. And so I assume that's how we ended up getting certain things like CNReal, certain things like a lot of the network changes, trying to capture some of the popularity that other networks were seeing at the time. To segue this into CNReal, obviously, there's a lot of mixed opinions on CNReal. Some people love them, some people hate them. I made a video recently defending CNReal. If anyone's seen that yet, go ahead and check that out. But apparently, due to some internals at Cartoon Network, a lot of them were not liked internally, correct? Due to terrible production?
Correct.
Obviously, it was a bad call, according to lots of folks inside. If you can't afford, to quote here, if you can't afford to compete with Disney live action and Nick live action, then don't at all. Which, honestly, pretty fair to say. Apparently, it's because we thought it was Jim Samples' idea, right? Or it was Stuart. A lot of people think it's Stuart Snyder's idea. It was Stuart Snyder's idea to start CNReal. Correct?
Correct. And then recently we had a thought that it was likely Sample's idea because it takes a few years for idea execution to carry through the network. However, we recently learned that it was likely more Michael Allen's idea.
Yes, that is crazy. That is breaking news, I feel like. Because for decades, literal decades at this point, it was presumed to be Stuart Snyder, and then again, you give a really good point about it potentially being Jim Samples, because again, we did see some groundwork for this before CNReal, with Reanimated and Race Against Time, the Ben 10 live action film, so there was definitely trickles of this kind of beforehand. So it could, there was definitely some credence to the theory that it could have been Jim Samples. However, we have confirmation that it was definitely Michael Allen whose idea it was to do CNReal. That is wild to me.
And according to the one of our network alumni here, Samples was more of an empty leader. He kind of did nothing. He just kind of existed. But they do say Betty Cohen was good.
Betty, from my experience of watching, especially checkerboard stuff, Betty was fantastic. I mean, that had a whole vibe and feel all to its own. It was very similar to, if anyone grew up with Boomerang, very similar to that, while at the same time being very different. I still think the original cartoon theater is one of the best things, like blocks or
just
I can't think of another way to
just
describe
better
it.
in presentation.
Absolutely. Had some of the greatest presentation I've ever seen from anything Cartoon Network has ever done since its debut. So I definitely think Betty Cohen was amazing.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk about Stewart too and Miller, because we do have all the pieces to them as well.
Sure.
So Stewart, he was more polarizing because he essentially forced the older legacy creatives out of the network. So he pretty much got people like Craig, Gendy, to just go elsewhere, while he was bringing in the new talent like JG, Pendleton, and more.
See, that's very unfortunate because I remember Craig McCracken being very distraught during that period of time, or at least in interviews I've seen of him reflecting on that period of time. And this does nothing but check out for that.
Yeah. And then going after Snyder came Miller, who you'd think she would be good because when she was initially announced, all we really knew was that she was on the marketing team for the Kids Next Door toys. So you would think, oh great, somebody who's actually there at the network during its heyday is here to lead the network. No, she is actually very spineless. She followed direct corporate orders and shareholders. And that's why into 2015, we started to see the network become more of a 24/7 Teen Titans Go network.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of that adds up to me because if all she did was follow corporate rule, all she did was follow corporate guidance, corporate direction, no wonder that from, I don't want to say at the beginning of the Check It era because I don't think that that's fair. I know a lot of people quite enjoy Check It. But obviously, as the years went on, especially post 2016, the network did not feel fun. The network felt like it didn't have a soul. And now that I'm an adult and I understand what it means when somebody says something feels corporate, absolutely, Cartoon Network felt corporate. It felt boring. It felt soulless. It felt directionless, which is a very corporate point of view.
Check It 1.0 was pretty strong, but anything after like 3.0 up to 6.0 was pretty boring.
Do we remember when she became president?
2013, I think.
I see. Okay. Go ahead.
Going with those other refaces from Check It 3.0 up to 6.0, you also had the fact that almost overnight, the entire world shifted from a skeuomorphic 3D design of interface, like if you remember, like iOS 6 to iOS 7, essentially. Everything just became flat designs.
Flat, boring, directionless.
Very little 3D was ever used throughout the 2010s.
And the fact that it was all Teen Titans Go at one point, again, that just screams to me directionless because you want to bring in new shows, you want to bring in and highlight new talent, new creators, new creatives, and that all after her presidency, I don't want to even just say took a backseat. Well, did it even exist at all? Because like we all know Craig McCracken's name, we all know Genndy Tartakovsky's name, we all know J.G. Quintel's name, we all know Pendleton Ward's name. But like a lot of the Cartoon Network originals that came out mid 2010s and even so on and so forth, like I don't know who the creator of Apple and Onion is. Like I don't know who the creator of Secret Mountain Fort Awesome is. It became more, we're gonna create products and or quote unquote like shows that products that are going to get views, they're going to sell, and less so about creator vision, less so about the creators themselves, which is quite unfortunate. And it felt, you could feel it throughout the entire decade.
And the thing is, with Cartoon Network, they had a specific kind of like grandfathering sort of program where if you worked on one show, you would probably have the potential to pitch and host your own show.
Right. Especially with the advantageous event of Cartoons and the big pick, right? It was very audience and creative and network, like not partnership, but almost collaboration in a way. It was, hey, we have all of these shows, we like all of these shows, but obviously we can't afford them all. We need to pick one. Let's leave it up to the viewers to decide. That mentality has taken more of a back seat, and I don't want to say it's because they have access to more data and numbers to where that's not necessary, because I completely disagree. I think that the fact that Teen Titans Go, of them being like, oh, well, this is a very popular show, let's just air it all the time, did nothing but nuke and tank their network and their views. And this has been my opinion for a long time. I think Cartoon Network tanking is what caused it's what caused the domino effect of cable, in my opinion. Because ever since Cartoon Network tanked is when all of a sudden, channel wide across all of TV, everyone started getting less views. Netflix started becoming more of a viable option. Streaming started becoming more of a viable option. And it could have just been the timing of streaming coming out at the same time. But part of me definitely wants to believe that Cartoon Network's downfall, because so many people watched Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network was one of the most in-demand TV channels, I mean, since its insurrection, or since it was debuted. So, I've always thought that. I'm curious your thoughts.
But another thing is that people don't also understand is that the 2016 initial merger with AT&T, where what caused Warner to take on the huge amount of debt, was also essentially a heads up to show creators to, hey, you got to wrap up your show before this merger closes, otherwise your show is going to become a tax write-off. And unfortunately, because of the pilot being uploaded in 2016, and then we finally got the series in 2019, I don't think that merger closed until late 2019 or early 2020. But because of that, Infinity Train got written off, Lakewood Plaza Turbo, or OKKO, got written off. Any DC Superhero Girls, that also got written off. Anything
that was a popular show.
Yeah, it disappeared overnight because it didn't wrap up. It didn't finish production, and it was an ongoing project, and Zaslav canceled it.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, but any program or project that was caught within that time frame that didn't wrap up production pretty much suffered from a huge loss of time, money, resources, and they can't legally release that art now. It's a blessing that Coyote and Day the Earth Blew Up have gotten saved because of the backlash and
and fan outcry, which is something I don't think that Cartoon Network specifically, but Warner Brothers or really any major company in a whole has listened to fans in a long time. I think we went almost an entire decade of them just kind of fingers in the ears, la la la, we can't hear you, we have the numbers here, we know what we're doing, la 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 la, and then their numbers kept tanking. And I think it was finally when they were like, all right, maybe the fans are on to something. Maybe they know what they're talking about. Maybe we should listen to them for once. Because Day the Earth Blew Up, despite no marketing, despite no advertising, did phenomenally well, in my opinion, all things considered.
So back in 2017, I believe, there was an interview with Stuart Snyder. He went on a radio show, and he did an interview where he revealed that Toonami was actually canned due to...
Remember on Cartoon Network was Toonami, and they took it away and then brought it back. I mean, what led to that decision?
Yeah, I was sitting in the chair when we made that very tough decision. You know, candidly, one of the things, Toonami was and I think we're talking about the late 2000s, because I joined Cartoon in 2007. It was a very tough decision, very big, a fan base that was very, very passionate about Toonami. The cold hard facts were at the time is we were in the business of really reinventing Cartoon Network and jump-starting it again for kids. And the Toonami block on Cartoon Network just was not drawing a large enough audience. It just was simply about numbers. And we tried to figure out how to keep it on the air, but at the end of the day, we needed that block of time to come with all the new shows that we had, that we planned on doing, and also to draw back a kid audience. And we warehoused Toonami for a period of time, and then brought it back on Adult Swim, because frankly, it fit better on Adult Swim in today's world than it actually fit at that time on Cartoon Network, which was a network for kids.
So, from this other alumni, we can see that there was an internal disagreement between other creatives, and one of the creatives got fired. So to add on top of the aggression of those internal politics, during the redesign in 2007, people inside of the company, they hated the new redesigned fat Lil Tom.
One thing I found interesting about this entire thing was that there was some mention about how the Toonami block had been deduced to almost nothing more than a bunch of Naruto reruns or simple Naruto episodes. And this assessment was agreed upon when brought up to them by some of the internals at Cartoon Network at the time for today. And that made a lot of fireworks go off in my head. For those of you who have been following me for a very long time, I want to say 12 or 13 years ago, my goodness, I made a video titled How Naruto Killed Toonami. And man, that comment section was a war zone. And I respect both opinions on both sides. But one of the things I said in my video was I was just thinking about it from a simple pragmatic, a simple just business corporate lens of Naruto being the popular show that it was at the time. Because, I mean, the only other shows airing on Toonami were shows like Prince of Tennis, Mare. You did have Dragon Ball Z reruns, but by 2007, 8-ish, I mean, like, everyone had already seen Dragon Ball Z at the time, so Naruto was definitely their biggest cash cow. They had some other reruns too, but, like, their other new shows just weren't really hitting too much. Naruto was definitely their big one. So my argument in the video was from the lens of a corporate perspective is why would you continue to have and pay for and support a quote-unquote cartoon block that's hosting a plethora of anime that, as a reminder, they all have to pay licensing for, and it's not cheap. I'm saying like to get licensed for an anime, we're talking like 10 grand bare minimum that they're having to at least just throw that way, and that's bare minimum. That's almost just me almost guessing, but I know it's at least that amount. So why would you host all these shows that you're not really making your money back for? Why would you host all of these shows and this entire block that you need to pay to have constant, updates to it? Like how they had just done Tom 4, and presumably they were going to eventually move on to a Tom 5. All of that requires money and funding to do. The block itself probably needed investors, and the investors probably were not satisfied with lots of different things. So my argument was always that Naruto killed Toonami, not necessarily in any negative sense, but it was always in the sense of like it was the most popular show. Why keep all these other shows? Why keep the branding when you could just toss all that out the window and just keep Naruto going on, same time slot, just on Cartoon Network itself instead of specifically Toonami? And it's so interesting to at least see. I feel slightly vindicated because I haven't gotten full confirmation on this, but it definitely seems that is definitely the idea. That's definitely something behind that.
Basically, the people over at Toonami, they always looked down on cartoons and thought animes were always more highbrow and better and more appreciated than cartoons. But they're literally on the same playing field. They're on the same network, so there's no need for competition like that. But ultimately, the block was pulled due to all that being said. Everybody on the board hated the Toonami crew, except for a select few, which is why in 2012 they brought it back with a whole different team.
And I know Steve Bloom was really excited to come back as the voice of Tom. He loves Toonami. Yeah, I know Steve. Because I just saw him posting on Instagram the other day, him in a Toonami shirt. He was wearing the exact same Toonami shirt that I have. I have that exact same one.
So for those familiar with the toy line for all the Cartoon Network shows, Craig McCracken specifically wanted to foster. He wanted to license Fosters through Kid Robot, who was responsible for the overall design of the nudes in 2008. But executives thought that Kid Robot was too niche and they instead went with Spin Masters. But they did eventually work with Kid Robot again with toys with those Cartoon Network Titans. So Samurai Jack was actually supposed to be planned to have a lot more toys. However, Samurai Jack ended up getting canceled overall because it couldn't keep kids' attention spans. When you're a kid, you want loud, you want flashy, but because Samurai Jack was coming more from a artistic point with telling the show without very little dialogue, it didn't really do well with children. It eventually was kicked over to Toonami, and then it just kind of fizzled out.
Which is interesting. That's something that that's also a new piece of information. That the reason why Samurai, because everyone wondered why Samurai Jack ended. Everyone talked about the final episode of season 4, how it's not really a finale, which it wasn't. I mean, Jack and the Baby. I mean, decent episode, but it was a finale. It was not. So there was always lots of speculation there on what happened. The argument of low ratings would come up. But it was a very difficult argument to kind of give a lot of credence to because of, I mean, everybody knew Samurai Jack. The show was popular despite apparently the real reason was it did die from low ratings, which is so interesting to me because I do recall conversations of Samurai Jack ending coming up, and they would say that, or I would hear that a lot of, oh, maybe it died from low ratings. I always found that in a way a bit difficult to believe because of its popularity at the time. But I mean, numbers don't lie, so it seemingly that was the case. It did die from low ratings.
So something that's been debated over the years during CN City's run was the usage or possibility of shows like Cow and Chicken, I Am Weasel, and other older legacy cartoons having their own menu icons. Through an alumni, I can at least confirm that there was one for Cow and Chicken that was made, which would have featured chicken.
I was interested in. I did want to discuss a little bit on that Cow and Chicken icon because it's so interesting to me that Cow and Chicken never got one, because you would think it would have with all of the icons that they've had. And so that only begs the question to me, you would definitely know the answer to this, but if Cow and Chicken never got one, that would tell me that I Am Weasel never did either. And did it?
Well, it's very much possible because they only made the icons for the shows that they liked, personally.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so they made one for Cow and Chicken, which I have yet to see it, but apparently it does feature just chicken.
And so I was curious about I Am Weasel. I'm also curious about Two Stupid Dogs as well. Which, fun fact, just to throw in there, I actually didn't know this until recently, that the big dog in Two Stupid Dogs is voiced by the brother in Everybody Loves Raymond. I did not know that until recently.
That's a fun one. Somebody in the CN City Discord likes to throw around.
It's a great fun fact. I love that guy. He's a great actor. Do we want to discuss the 3D Double D here?
I don't know if I can
or
show
is
it.
Because it's too internal.
Because it's Jeff's image. I don't know if I can show it.
So for those unaware, apparently Juniper Lee was not very well liked at Cartoon Network by a lot of people, if anybody, which to me was very interesting to hear, because growing up, personally, I liked Juniper Lee a lot. Thought it was a really good show. Apparently, a lot of people didn't like it because it was not a fit for the network, and by a lot of people, I'm speaking internally. They didn't feel it was a good fit, and after hearing that, I can definitely see that complaint. If I watch Juniper Lee, I definitely get more of a Disney show vibe. To describe my thought here, it's very similar to the way that a lot of fans will describe Camp Lazlo, feeling more like a Nickelodeon show. In that same sense, I feel Juniper Lee was definitely more of a Disney show. That aside, though, personally, I did still think the show was really good. I thought the opening theme was an absolute banger. But apparently, they wanted to use, or there were some questions about using Juniper Lee in the most recent Jellystone special, The Crisis on Infinite Mirths. But Cartoon Network specifically said no. And it all goes back to them just not liking the character.
Yeah, the main reason why it got greenlit in the first place was because the creator was on a show called Real World.
So for those who loved Megas XLR, just like me, and just like a lot of people always assumed or would question why it was so short-lived, why it didn't get a continuation. Even the creators themselves have been trying for some kind of revival or other things of the sort. A lot of people presumably thought that it was a ratings issue or things like that, and that was partially true. However, it does go a bit deeper than that, because when you think ratings issue, there has to be a specific reason behind the reason why there's a ratings issue, right? So if people aren't watching, what's the reason? Well, apparently the viewers hated it because they felt it was too snarky, and a lot of kids felt that it had convoluted storytelling. Now, I will give credence to that final point. The storytelling was very convoluted. In my personal opinion, I felt that almost in a way added to it, because it was kind of like balls to the wall, crazy. You don't know really, like, it's because the premise of the show is already crazy. It's a regular guy who plays video games all day at home who now has access to basically a Gundam, and this woman comes down from another planet trying to flee like an alien invasion, and he now has to fight these like random aliens and monsters that pop up. Like, for me, it was like, that's so crazy, it's awesome, in my opinion. However, if I try to put myself in the shoes of other people who might not care for this type of content, I can totally understand the dislike towards the show, personally.
So, for all the Ben 10 fans out there, Ben 10 was only made for one reason. It was because it was essentially one of the many elevator pitches that were made to Sam Register. And that was, in regards to toys, you got 10 characters, 10 toys. So 10 aliens, 10 toys. And the rest was history. Ben 10 became a thing. Same thing goes for Generator Rex too, but didn't do that well.
I do know that Ben 10 was definitely one of the bigger sales of the time. In fact, if anybody watches me at all, one of the things I've been echoing for years is I've always said that Ben 10 was one of the most profitable as far as merchandise shows Cartoon Network has ever had, only rivaled by Powerpuff Girls, and it wasn't confirmed until semi-recently that Powerpuff Girls, again, this was also my hunch. I had always assumed Powerpuff Girls was the highest selling IP Cartoon Network ever had. But with shows like Ben 10, it was very difficult to judge. It was very difficult to really kind of figure out if that was the case. But no, in fact, Powerpuff Girls was their number one show in terms of money making for IPs and other things of the like, such as that. So I found that very interesting, and once again, I felt very, very vindicated. I don't want this to be I don't want this to turn into an I was right video, but at the same time, like, dang, 16-year-old me was really cooking.
So, for those who remember the monstrosity that was Problem Solvers and wondered why it even aired in the first place, it's because Mike Lazo saw Aqua Teen Hunger Force and how successful it was, and he wanted to bring that same sort of weirdness and interesting style to the regular Cartoon Network. But clearly that didn't go well at all, because it only lasted, I don't even think it finished airing the first season, did it?
Not to my knowledge. It was just a very ugly show. It was a very just... I really don't understand what they were really going for. I mean, even the human characters were not even remotely attractive looking. They had just the strangest haircuts, strangest looks, and weirdest faces. It was... Cartoon Network went through a very strange time during that period, because there was also things like Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, And while I did love Mad, I did love their version of Mad. I would be disingenuous and dishonest to say that there were no shorts that didn't have very crude looking animation, very kind of nasty, disgusting styles of animation. And I wonder what was going on internally. What graph or chart were they looking at where they were like, guys, we got to really nasty up this animation here? It makes me curious.
We got to give kids seizures like they did in Japan with Pokemon.
Right. Right.
Oh, wow. So I'm reading on the wiki here. They did finish airing the first season, but the remaining season 2 episodes were kicked over to Netflix, and then they are now on YouTube as a compilation.
Sick.
And they were renewed for season 3, but it was canceled.
Oh, wow. I wonder why.
So, for those in the Cartoon Network City community, you might know that other locations across the world, like Latin America, Brazil, and Europe, they kept City up until about 2010/2012. And the reason for that being is because the creatives at the network would actually fly out and provide them the assets and help them get them running with City for international purposes. However, the issue is in 2005 and 2006, when everything with Animal Logic fell apart and everything at Cartoon Network fell apart with the executives, they weren't able to fly out to help them maintain the structure of the international networks. So you have us in the US, we have the Yes era, Nudes era, and meanwhile, the other people at the other regions are fuming because they are stuck with a now outdated branding package from 2004 in the year 2008. And a lot has changed since then, and it's also why places like Cartoon Network Africa, I believe, they got something called New Wave, because they essentially scrapped together their own funding and replaced the branding image that way. But a lot of places were stuck with it until Check It.
I assume that's why that there were a lot of versions of City in other countries that looked not great. I do recall the Carnival. I forget, you might have to remind me which country that was from. I want to say Latin America. No, I want to say it was Brazil.
It was Brazil. Brazil or Portugal. That's one of them.
Yeah, I do want to say it was that. And I remember the ads looking very off-model, very, I don't want to say crude, but maybe if I were to use the word crude, maybe 5% of its full definition. It just didn't look great. There was lots of, I think they upped the CG usage. There was definitely, if I recall, you might have to correct me on this, but I recall us talking about this prior, there was a bit of misplacement as regards to the world of Sin City and what in the world was where specifically, such as a candy store or whatever. It was kind of scattered.
So that's more a product of the fact that Cartoon Network was very strict on file sharing. So Animal Logic developed the initial City. However, when it came to Latin America and their other regions, they reached out to companies like Ink Apache, now known as Trifecta Studios. But the thing is, because they were sending everything through FTP, which is a file transfer protocol, Cartoon Network didn't allow them to send full map files. The most they could do were texture files and small props. The rest, the studios that they were partnered with, they had to create their own CN City.
Which is crazy to think about, that they would have to kind of rebuild all those assets off of somebody else's work. It almost makes me wonder how that was created internally. Did they kind of did their animators or whoever was in charge, did they just review the footage of Animal Logic's work and create something based off of that? Were they given simple...
They were given pitch documents, if I recall.
Pitch docs. Interesting. Very interesting. That must have been a very difficult creative process for you to kind of create something like somebody else's work, but the amount of references you have to said work is limited. I can only imagine the difficulties there.
Especially in such limited time. Like, even with Animal Logic, some of the stuff they used were library models. Like, they were paid resources that they could just borrow. Like trees, those were all paid. Those were all outsourced.
The trees, like just the trees themselves in any scene, or
yeah.
Wow. I guess it's like those artists who say they can't draw hands. I guess they just couldn't draw trees. There's like, look, somebody else do this.
Well, I mean, for the realistic look they were going for, they kind of needed it.
Yeah. Speaking of other countries that had access to Cartoon Network, we all know that, well, I hope most of us know, that Cartoon Network City did continue in these other areas for quite a period longer, as we discussed prior. So as a result, when new shows began to come out, right, they would get things that we never had, such as the character icons, the show icons, during the periods of coming up next. It's, this show, that show, or that show. And so obviously with the arrival of new shows, they had to make new icons and things of the sort. So there's a lot of icons that we never got here, that if you watch promos and things of the like in other countries, you can now see them. So there's a fun one of Johnny Test that we have here, where his drawing. Look, I love all of the drawings that they've done. His drawing here is he looks bugging out. He looks like he is bugging out. But this is definitely a very interesting design because we never got this here. We had Johnny Test obviously, but it was way past when we were done with CN City. So it's very interesting to see this done, and it was done by an artist who did all of the other designs for these. So it's not like it was done by a different artist like we were discussing with the actual promos and bumpers themselves, such as the city. The artwork for the next and later bumpers were all kind of done by the same person normally.
The only exception is, so the way the menu icons, or the now then icons, some will call them, worked was the artist would draw them and then the art director would approve them for air. However, there were times where the network didn't have the time to ask the art and the art director to collaborate, and so they would have somebody at Turner Studios draw a quick sketch or a quick drawing and then turn that in, and that's what they would use overseas. Sometimes it was just a cropped image of stock art.
And is that what was done in the 2006 era here with the Squirrel Boy image and the Robot Boy image?
Robot Boy was just taken from the intro. They meant to use it as a temporary, and they forgot to fix it, so it got passed on. But Rodney is all original, from what I could tell.
Do we know if it was done by the same person doing the others, or it was done by an intern?
It was done by the artist, yes.
Interesting. Oh, okay, I see. Interesting. It looks very different. You know why? I think it's the side profile.
Yes.
We don't see much from this artist in a side profile. I see. I wonder if it's because of his nose.
Yeah, because I mean, if like Phineas from Phineas and Ferb, like if you have Phineas facing forward, he looks like a diamond.
So, I think this has been an amazing, almost kind of peek behind the curtain, kind of inside look, slightly, at a lot of the internal things that were going on at Cartoon Network at the time. I like I said, I feel a bit vindicated because a lot of the things that I genuinely thought about the network, such as Naruto, which I still need farther confirmation on, but the fact that it seems that I'm in the right direction is a bit vindicating, as well as just a lot of the network decisions and things, as well as things we were completely wrong about, even myself included, such as the who greenlit CN Real, who was in charge of certain things, who did what. Very interesting to kind of see all of this kind of come to a bit of a fruition here. And it's all very, very interesting to me, and I really hope that it was very interesting for everybody else as well. What are some final thoughts you have?
I mean, all I can really say, if this video does well, we might do a part 2, because there is more information that we can dwell on.
So if you guys liked this video, make sure you give it a like and a comment to make us know that you guys liked it. So if we will do a part 2. We've got to make sure that this video gets enough views and stuff for it.
Yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this little peek behind the curtain. I know I sure did. Did you?
Oh, obviously, yes. I love anytime I get to take a deep dive on Cartoon Network. Oh man, it flashes me back to City era. But anyways, you guys, thanks so much as always for joining us on today's video. Like I said, leave a comment. What was your favorite thing that was unveiled during this discussion? What was the coolest thing that you guys quite enjoyed? What was the most surprising thing you guys thought about? Make sure you guys go subscribe to Ninja's channel down below. He does a plethora of incredibly amazing deep dives on Cartoon Network history, Cartoon Network things you didn't know, city deep dives. And if you guys love Cartoon Network, he's your guy. He's your guy to go to. Link in the description is going to be down below. Make sure you guys give a sub. And, like always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.